It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Jennifer Landels. Hi, Jennifer. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Oh, doing fine. Thank you very much. You are the managing editor of Pulp Literature, which is, it's an online, what exactly is it?
Pulp Literature is a fiction anthology. It's not online. It's print. It is available on digital, but it is a print magazine based here in British Columbia, Canada. We publish quarterly anthologies of short fiction, poetry, novel excerpts, and usually a graphic novel short every time.
Okay, are these complete works in your magazine, or is it just like a trailer or a teaser to get people to go out and buy the books?
There are some excerpts, but for the most part, they are complete short stories.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So there's a few serialized, like we do a serialized novel, at least one every issue. But the bulk of the magazine is in complete short stories. So
it's an actual, real, hold-it-in-your-hand kind of magazine, yeah?
Yep.
Wow. I know it sounds funny, but those things are kind of slowly fading away. Don't seem to have lots of them anymore. I mean, the newsstands seem to still carry stuff, but I don't know of a lot of people that carry around magazines with them anymore.
Well, when we started this, it was about 7.5 years ago. We were kind of just complaining about the fact that, you can't just, hand somebody a magazine anymore and say, here, I think you'd enjoy this story. Everything's on your Kindle, or, you can recommend things, but then they have to go and buy them. Whereas, if it's a physical magazine, you can just give it to somebody.
Well, that's true. I mean, there definitely is advantages. And I've had this discussion with authors on who we've always made this comparison between how the digital world and digital technology has affected authors versus musicians. And it's quite a bit different because physical CD markets have really gone down significantly once the advent of download was available. But it hasn't hurt the printed book once ebooks were available. I think there's a lot of people who still would rather have a book in their hand and perhaps a magazine.
Well, I know I prefer to read that way. I mean, I will read digital, but I read better on print. Maybe that's just my age, because that's what I grew up reading. But I know that when we get the print proof of our magazine, it's been through copy editors, it's been through proofreaders for the digital PDF. I've been through it digitally, and yet I still catch typos on that print proof almost every time. Just tiny errors that your eyes skim past when you're reading online. Which may be a good thing or a bad thing, depending, but it is a different type of reading.
Well, it's true, and also you don't need electricity for it. Like you were talking about having high winds. If the power goes out, you can just light a candle and read a book. But your pad is going to disappear
very shortly without a charge.
Without a charge, right? And you might not have internet without electricity if you didn't download it. So, I mean, there's all kinds of obstacles that one has to navigate with an ebook.
And never mind, it's safer reading in the bathtub with a print book.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So how long has this magazine been around? You said, 7 years?
Yeah, it's just over 7 years. Our first issue came out January 2014.
What is the frequency of the issues?
It's quarterly, so
quarterly.
They're just one for every season. We have a feature feature author for every
Author.
issue.
Yeah.
So that's usually somebody who's a little bit better known, say a well-established writer. And what we're usually looking for from them is somebody writing outside their usual genre. So, we can have, say, a mystery writer who's writing a science fiction piece or something like that. So it's a little bit outside of the box that way. We've had a romance writer write a zombie story set in medieval Scotland. We've had a memoirist write science fiction stories. So it's a little bit fun that way. And then for the rest, it's usually up-and-coming writers. So, writers who maybe have a few short stories under their belt, a few publications, or sometimes it's brand new writers who this is their first publication ever.
So what is your, I forget the term now, but is it circulation? Is how they used to call that?
Yeah. Our circulation for print is about 120 copies, and then ebook it's usually about 300. So it's not a huge circulation, but we've got a pretty. The print subscribers stay with us a long time. We've got subscribers who've been with us since the beginning.
I got a kick out of something on your bio that I wanted to bring up. It says she holds a BA in medieval English literature. I thought, now, when you went to school, it was that you decided right away, okay, I'm going to major in medieval English literature?
Actually, no. I started off in biology.
Oh, big switch, yeah.
I was in third year, and I was taking Anglo-Saxon language as an arts elective, and I was acing that. It was a breeze. I was loving it. It was my favorite class, and with no effort whatsoever. And here I was, bogged down in biological stats and falling asleep in lectures. And I just switched horses midstream.
Well, a degree like that, I think one would almost have to become a writer, yeah? Well,
you can either teach or you can write.
Or teach, right. There's something else on here that I have no idea. What is a blue penciler?
Okay, so a blue penciler is at conferences, writing conferences usually. You can sit down with an editor and bring a few pages of your work in and have them critique it on the spot. So it's just sort of one-on-one feedback in person. So I do that at conferences when we have conferences and when we ever have them again.
Well, right, because of COVID, yeah. Have you gone virtual with conferences now? Are you doing Zoom calls?
Yeah, I've been guest to a few online conferences. I've done more, with my other hat on, which is teaching mounted combat. I've done a few sort of live streams from our barn, swordplay and horse demonstrations and things like that.
I'm sorry.
Kind of get
teaching what?
Sorry? Mounted combat.
Mounted combat.
Swordplay on horseback.
Like polo with swords?
Kind of, yeah.
Except you're trying to kill the other person?
Well, we try not to kill them, otherwise we run out of people to play with.
So it's okay. I've never heard of this. I mean, this sounds very medieval.
It's a pretty niche pastime.
Well, explain it a little bit, if you would.
So I do historical swordplay on the ground as well. So that's going back to historical manuscripts, which are there's quite a few of them, but the one I used for the horseback stuff is a 14th century manuscript by an Italian by the name of Fiore de Liberi, and it's basically a fight book. It tells you how to fight unarmed with pole arms, with swords, and finally on horseback. So it's interpreting those sources and teaching other people so that I have somebody to fight with.
So this is mock, obviously, not real, right?
Well, it's done with dull swords, and on horseback we use nylon swords for the sake of the horses. But on the ground, they are real swords. You wear armor of which can be, like modern lacrosse type gear, or some people do fight in full harness. I don't do that. That's a lot of metal to buy and wear and look after. But rapier sparring, that's sort of the musketeer type sword.
Oh, okay.
You can do that with just a fencing mask and some neck protection, maybe some chest protection. And the swords are blunted, but the sword play is real. You are striking as if you were in a duel for your life. You're just fortunately not in a duel for your life.
Do people actually wear chainmail as well, or is it?
Some people have mail armor.
Okay.
Most people use the combination of mail and bits of plate. The chest and the shoulders, elbows, all those sorts of things, and there's a fair number of people out there with full harness.
That's got to weigh a ton when you put all that stuff on.
It does weigh a lot, but if it's fitted properly, it's supported by your arming garment, which is the clothing you wear underneath, is this very tight-fitting. It's something that fits quite tight around the waist, and it has little arming points, which are sort of strings that you tie to the armor. And so the garment that you're wearing actually supports the armor and spreads the weight of it around your body, rather than all just sitting on your shoulders.
What got you interested in this? This seems very obscure, like I've never heard of it until right now.
Well, I was researching a novel, and I was researching a novel that I've actually only recently got around to writing, as about a shepherdess turned spy in the 17th century. And I was researching 17th century rapier, and I found out, just by Googling, that there was a school here in Vancouver, where I live, that teaches you to actually fight with 17th century rapiers for real. So I thought, well, I got to try that out, and that was about 12 years ago. So, it kind of stuck. And after I'd been doing that for a couple of years, I sort of said to the director that, look, you've got swords, I've got horses, we should do something with those together. So that's how I got into the mounted combat and created the program, and been doing that for about, 11 years now.
Do you get a lot of students for this?
We have a fairly, for the swordplay in general, Academy Duello, which is where I started out, has like over 2,000 members, and generally about 200 active students at a time. It's one of the biggest swordplay schools in the world. The mounted combat is a bit smaller, but we're usually running on about a dozen active students at any given time.
Have you ever been approached by film studios that needed to use you guys as stand-ins or something for, Lord of the Rings or any kind of a film that would work in that period?
I did do extra work one day when they just needed somebody they need people who had their own swords. I did. I was an extra background actor for that. And I've occasionally been approached by people in the film industry. The film industry is pretty big in Vancouver, so there are a lot of productions going on, but nothing that we've had the right type of horses or we don't do this in full costume either. So there are some people who have sort of garb, which is medieval, but our horses wear modern saddles and have modern tacks. So there are other people in the film industry who specialize in the actual sort of movie set stuff.
Are they English or Western horses?
Our horses are English.
Okay.
We ride English. Some people use Western saddles. A lot of the horseback archery people will use a Western if they don't have, let's say, a Hungarian saddle or something like that.
Well, because I could just, when you were talking, the film Narnia came into my head.
Right.
And some of those battle scenes in Narnia, and I thought, that sounds like what she's talking about. But I guess it could be, yeah. You could sort of retrofit probably your horses if needed to do a scene like that, yeah.
I mean, they're not trained for stunts or anything like that, but we sometimes, we do get approached quite a lot by small productions, sometimes for just looking for horses in a field or something like that too. So,
well, we do have to wrap this up. Do you have a website that you want to give out?
Yeah, for pulp literature, it's pulpliterature.com, and my own personal website is jmlandels.stiffbunnies.com.
Okay.
Stiff bunnies as in, STIFF, and bunnies as in the plural of rabbits.
Is that all one word?
All one word, yeah. It was my partners in my band many years ago, before we had children.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I'm glad the phone call held up, and hopefully the wind won't blow you away.
Yeah, we keep our fingers crossed.
All right. Well, nice meeting you. Thank you for coming on the show, and best of luck.
Thanks so much, Douglas.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on the Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
DJC Music and DJC Productions are pleased to announce a brand new website. We have started a listing website for radio show hosts as well as potential show guests. This is a meeting site where hosts and guests can come together. Show hosts can list their show and types of guests they're interested in booking. Potential guests can list their talents, bio, accomplishments, or anything they feel makes them an interesting radio show guest. There are no recurrent payments, only a one-time $5 listing fee. Your listing will stay up until you decide to cancel. Previous guests of The Douglas Coleman Show are welcome to submit their guest listing free of charge. Go to radiohostsandguests.com. That's radiohostsandguests.com.
Love coffee, huh? But wait a minute. It seems like every time you finish a cup of coffee, you get all of these side effects along with it. Heartburn, indigestion, upset stomach, acid reflux. As the world's first and only organic acid-free coffee, Tyler's Coffee is able to provide a healthier option in the solution for more than 100 million individuals who have sensitive stomachs or suffer from acid-related modalities. This is Tyler's acid-free coffee. Coffee without the consequences.
Hi, this is John Morgan, Production Supervisor for DJC Productions. You're listening to The Douglas Coleman Show.
Okay, please welcome to The Douglas Coleman Show, Carl Honoré. Hey, Carl, how are you?
I'm very well. It's great to be with you.
Well, thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it. In big, bold letters at the top of your bio, it says, Carl Honoré is an award-winning writer, broadcaster, and TED speaker. He is the voice of the global slow movement. When I first read that, I thought that you were a union activist. Go slow, and that's not exactly what you're talking about, is it?
It's not, no. The slow movement with a capital S is very far away from that. Probably easiest if I start telling you, first of all, what it's not, right? It's not about doing everything very slowly. That would be absurd, right? I'm not an extremist, and I'm not a fundamentalist of slowness. I love speed, right? Faster is often better. We all know that. The slow revolution, the slow movement with a capital S is about doing things at the right speed. So sometimes fast, but sometimes a little bit more slowly, right? Musicians talk about the tempo giusto, right? That Italian phrase, the correct tempo for every moment.
Yeah.
That kind of gets at what slow is about. So it's quality over quantity. It's being present in the moment. It's doing one thing at a time. Ultimately, slow is about doing everything not as fast as possible, but as well as possible. Really, really simple notion, but an immensely powerful one in a world where people are racing against the clock every moment of the day.
So you go around and do TED Talks based on this idea?
I do talks, TV, radio. Yeah, I kind of race around the world telling everyone how wonderful it is to slow down. But I race slowly, of course, in keeping with my philosophy.
Well, so let's break that down a little bit about the slow philosophy. How do you apply this to corporations?
Sure. Well, I mean, there's so many ways, right? I mean, working hours, right? You can only squeeze so many hours of productive labor out of a human being before the human being starts to suffer and the company bottom line begins to look a little bit wobbly. So companies that embrace the slow philosophy realize that their staff need moments when they can switch off, when they can leave the coalface, they can disconnect from the computer, they can rest, they can sleep, they can talk to their children and their partners, they can have hobbies, right? Yeah, so but in that sense, it's about kind of striking a balance between being on and off, or leaning in, but also leaning back, right? So that's very much a slow way of thinking about the workplace. There's an intimate bond between creativity and slowness. We know this from all the great thinkers in the sciences and in the arts, that you have to slow down to tap into those deep reservoirs of creative, innovative thinking. Psychologists actually call that kind of thinking slow thinking, right? So the clue is in the title. Another way of thinking about slow in the workplace is listening, right? It's that very simple human act, which I think a lot of us have forgotten how to do because we're so rushed, we're so busy, we're so distracted, we're so over-caffeinated that we just find it very hard to listen to other people. And yet listening is the core, it's the cornerstone of successful enterprises, right? Because it's how you build teams, it's how you collaborate, it's how you avoid difficult mistakes, it's how you win over clients and customers. You need to channel your inner tortoise in order to listen properly, right? So those are three examples of how flying the flag of slow can get you ahead in a world hooked on speed.
Well, I've certainly heard the listening example many times from other guests that I've had on the show who are leadership coaches who said that the mark of a great leader is a good listener. As one of the marks of a good leader is a great listener. CEOs who take the time to listen to all the employees and what they have to say. I think that's very valid. I've certainly have worked in environments in the past where the CEO didn't want to hear anything from anyone. And the tendency was, even though the company was making money and was successful financially, it was a very toxic work environment. People just didn't want to be there. They hated getting there every day. They didn't want to talk to other people. He just created this environment of, I don't know, sort of like mental cubicles. You know, I mean, everybody has a cubicle, but everybody was mentally just putting up their walls, and it wasn't a very nice place.
Yeah, and the thing with a company like that is, sure, in the short term, you might be able to turn up some good numbers at the end of the year, but that's not a good medium and long-term strategy, right? Because what you're going to end up doing is alienating and turning off your best staff. People, as you say, will be walled off into silos. They won't be sharing information. They won't be collaborating. In the longer term, that company is going to fail, right? So that's why forward-looking, wise, clear-eyed leaders always put a lot of time and effort and energy into listening. You know, as human beings, we've got 2 ears and 1 mouth, right? I think that there's a message in there.
Well,
listen more, talk less.
This was years ago, but I've heard that I think American companies, now I'm not sure about Canada, but American companies are probably the worst offenders of non-slow, in the sense of it's all rush, work. And I heard that, like in Germany, they get 8 weeks vacation a year. That's sort of a standard for most employees. Is that correct?
I'm not sure if it's quite 8, but you certainly in the European Union, you're looking at an average of about 6. And actually, that's a good example. If you look at the Nordic countries, you know, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, Norway, Iceland, you could throw, as you did a moment ago, Germany, Holland in there. They work many fewer hours than people in North America do, and yet their economies rank consistently among the most competitive, the most productive, and the most creative in the world. And one reason for that, I mean, there's a whole range of reasons, but one clearly is that their staff or their citizens are not burned out. They have enough time to switch off, to recharge their batteries, to go away from the office and let a problem at work play around in the back of their minds because they're not stressed out. and then come to back to the office, the desk the next day with a solution, right? So there's so much evidence, and that's the macro level, right? You're seeing similar examples at the micro level. Microsoft ran an experiment a year or so ago in Japan where they moved to a 4-day week, right? Which is quite a drastic thing to happen. A lot of companies are toying around with it now. But Microsoft tried it out for a month, and at the end of the month, they found that their productivity had shot up 40%, right? 40% by working less, which is a perfect example of this. I mean, I call it the delicious paradox of slow, right? That by slowing down, doing things with your full attention, switching on, switching off, changing gears, all that stuff that is at the core of the slow philosophy. By slowing down in that sense, not only do you get better results, but often you get them quicker, right? There's that old military adage that kicks around that slow is smooth and smooth is fast, right? So, it's going to be the slow in many ways who inherit the earth.
Well, you kind of presumpted me because I was going to ask you what would be an example of something a company could do to implement this idea of slow. So let me go back to your Microsoft example. So they cut down to a 32-hour-a-week work week?
Well, they went to 4 days. I'm not sure how many hours they were per day, but everybody had a 3-day weekend. And at the end, they found that people were physically happier, they were healthier. I mean, all the metrics were pointing in the right direction, but the standout metric is productivity, because of course what the doomsayers and the demons and the merchants of speed will always tell you, which is that if you take your foot off the gas pedal for half a second, you will be steamrollered into the ground by the people who are going fast all the time. Untrue, nonsense, claptrap, right? And there's a perfect example from a cutting edge, big company in one of the fastest moving, most cutthroat sectors of the global economy, Microsoft, discovering the same truth, which is if you slow down, you're a better version of yourself, right? And not just at work, right? You're a better parent, you're a better friend, you're a better spouse, you're a better neighbor, you're a better citizen, right? All those things are wrapped up in one. And slow is so often the key to unlock that door to that whole other room of potential in a house that just gets forgotten when all you do is get stuck in fast forward and every moment becomes a dash to the finish line.
Well, that's true. Although Microsoft might not be the best example of that steamroller issue because, let's face it, I mean, Microsoft isn't, I don't think, terribly worried that somebody else is going to come along and replace Windows anytime in the near future.
Well, obviously, Microsoft doesn't have to worry too much about its Windows monopoly, but there are other parts of its business which I think are getting picked off and where it isn't really keeping up with the competition. And so, maybe embracing their inner tortoise may open the door to that. But there are other examples, of course, of slowing down and thriving in the corporate world as a result. Volkswagen is another example. A few years back, they tweaked their servers so that most staff could no longer send or receive emails outside working hours, which sounds like a suicide note for a global company like that. How on earth can they stop working for 14 hours a day? But it turns out they can, because they discovered that most of those emails that were chasing Volkswagen staff home in the evening, just as, let's be honest, most of the emails that chase the rest of us home in the evening are not that important, right? They could probably wait till the next day, or if the person who sent them in the first place had been forced to think about whether they really needed to send them, they quite possibly wouldn't have sent them at all. And other companies, Puma, IBM, have followed suit. And now you're also finding it even at the legislative level. I think France has come out with a law giving rights to certain workers in larger companies to disconnect from their phones away from the office. So, the tectonic plates are shifting culturally here as we went through a time of being enthralled to the notion of being always on. I think we're realizing that is pretty toxic. It's backfiring on us. It's undermining our ability to think, to focus, to recharge, to be ourselves. And so I think more and more you're finding, not just in the corporate world, but people are saying, hang on a minute here. Let's just do this thing better by slowing down a little bit, right? And thinking about how we slow down, doing it wisely, but doing it.
Somebody who was able to multitask used to be a really good thing. And listening to what you're saying, I'm not so sure it is. I think that multitasking kind of goes against what you're talking about. Would you agree with
Utterly.
that?
Totally. I mean, multitasking is one of the great myths of the early 21st century. We can't do it, right? Human beings cannot multitask. And I'm sure you've probably got some women listening right now saying, who is this guy mansplaining me about multitasking? I'm a woman. You can't, I'm afraid. The human brain cannot, and this is, all neuroscientists will tell you this, that no human brain, even female brains, can think meaningfully about two things at the same time. When we multitask, what we're actually doing is juggling, right? We're toggling back and forth between tasks. And all that, you get task one gets, 5 seconds, then task two, 10 seconds, and all that gear grinding is just as cognitively wasteful as it sounds, because if you take two people, the fast person, the multitasker, versus, let's call the other person the slow person, the monotasker, who wherever possible focuses on one thing at a time, give them the same list of tasks, the fast multitasker will take up to twice as long and make up to twice as many mistakes, right? So that's another example of when the slow way, the doing one thing at a time, the being focused, the being present, is not actually slow at all, right? It's more efficient than the ostensibly fast route, right? So again, multitasking is a perfect metaphor for the folly of speed.
Do you think that 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week is about right? Or do you think we need to tweak the sort of traditional standard working hours?
Yeah, I shy away from a kind of universal, because I think everybody is so different. Industries are different. We're all different at different times of year. I mean, there are times when I want to put in longer hours and different times of the year I don't. So I always avoid saying this is the magic number that we should all aspire to or be bound to. But I think that what we do need to have is a conversation now about limits, right? A really thoughtful, meaningful, open discussion about up to what point people can work productively and then allow them to stop. And I think the moment we have a kind of Wild West, no boundaries, no limits scenario, and it's taking a heavy toll on our health, our well-being, our focus, on everything, right? So I think the way forward is less is more. It's hard to pin a firm number on it, but I think a lot of people, if they sat down and looked at how many hours they're cranking out, they would probably find that they could work better if they put in fewer hours. Some people maybe not. Some people it might be just a question of working the same hours, but working them with a more slow spirit. So taking breaks during those hours, switching off their phone for some of the time, and maybe end up working the same number of hours, but cranking out more productivity as a result because they've approached it with a slow spirit. So it's a complex picture. That's why I'm dancing around.
No, that's okay.
The question of putting one number on it.
Yeah, one size doesn't fit all.
No, it doesn't. Absolutely.
I was in France many, many years ago, and the one thing I thought was curious is that I was staying with a family for a little while, and they got a 2-hour lunch break. The man did, who was working as an engineer, I think at Airbus. And he would start like at 8 o'clock in the morning, and he lived close enough to the plant so he could come home for lunch every day. And I think he started work at 8. He came home at 12, and then they had this big lunch. He would leave about 1:45 from the house, and then we'd see him again around 6 or so. Do you think that's one good thing? Because I think a 2-hour lunch break in the United States is pretty much unheard of.
Yeah. Even on vacation, I think probably in the U.S., 2 hours. People would start to feel guilty if their lunch was extending to 2 hours even when they're on vacation. I think the principle there is a good one. I think it's so crucial to pause in the middle of the day and eat away from none of this dining al desco nonsense. Get up from your work, stop, move into a different mode of thought, have a conversation, pay attention to your food, eat good food, eat it slowly, right? Enjoy it.
Yeah.
I don't think you necessarily have to take 2 hours away for that. I think an hour is great. I think even half an hour, 40 minutes can be enough. The trouble, of course, is that many people just power on through and are wolfing down a sandwich or inhaling a salad over their computer, right? Which I think that is a very poor use of time because, again, it's this idea that, and you see it, you hear it especially in the U.S., that it's a waste of time, right? That lunch is a waste of time, that lunch is for wimps. I mean, there was that expression, right? Lunch is for wimps. But actually, that's completely the wrong way of thinking about it because lunch is not a waste of time. It's an investment of time because your body and your mind need that space, especially in the middle of the day, to get away, to refresh, to reboot, to reset, to recharge.
Right.
And you're going to come back and get way more done and get it done better with fewer mistakes in the afternoon if you take some kind of genuine lunch break. Now, a full-on 2 hours of French, 4-course meal, that's probably not going to fly in the U.S. I don't even take that long, right? I'm happy with my lunch breaks. I usually take about 45 minutes, between 45 and an hour. Sometimes a bit less if I've got a day that just doesn't allow it. But I always take a lunch break, right? And I tell you, I get way more done now than I did in the days when I didn't take a lunch break.
Well, I've seen companies in the United States that actually bring lunch in every day so people will stay at their desk. And I think that's just a terrible idea.
I think having lunch, a good, healthy lunch prepared for you is a wonderful idea, but you have to eat it away from your desk, right? Otherwise, you're defeating the purpose of a proper lunch. That's not what they're doing there is just pimping a bad lunch, right? They're giving you healthy food, but pushing you to eat it in an unhealthy way. So and I know there are other companies in the United States which go the whole hog. So they supply good food, but they also create quiet spaces where people can go and eat it away from their desks.
That's fine.
Actually have a real lunch.
Yeah.
So that's what I would applaud that approach. The other one is a halfway house, which, it certainly is better to have a healthy food at your desk than have unhealthy food at your desk. But you're still at your desk, right? And that's, in a way, the real problem.
Well, and I think the company expected you to keep working. One hand on your fork, one hand on your computer. And I think that's just, that's bad. And even before I spoke with you on this concept of slow, I always thought that was a terrible idea because I think people do need a break.
Yeah. And of course, this is the irony, of course, is that the faster things get in the workplace, the more important it is to slow down and take a break.
Yeah.
Because it's only by slowing down, calming, getting still, getting focused again, getting recharged, all that. That's the only way that you're going to be able to cope with that vertiginous spin of speed that is the modern workplace, right? I mean, meditation, mindfulness is a really good example, which of course the corporate America has embraced wholesale, right? I mean, you can't swing a cat in most American offices now without hitting a mindfulness program or instructor. And I think there's a lot to that. I mean, we know the science is very clear that meditation, mindfulness, these things do work. They enhance concentration, they reduce feelings of stress, they make us feel calmer, but they also do something even deeper, which is that people who meditate over a period of time begin to rewire their brains. They increase the level of what's called gyrification, which means they have more folds or more density in their cerebral cortex. And if you've got a denser cerebral cortex, you know what you can do? You can process information faster, right? So it's that delicious paradox of slow that I always talk about, that those who slow down with meditation are better able to cope in a fast world than those who never slow down at all, right? I mean, in a world addicted to speed, slowness is a superpower, right? It's very simple, it's very clear, and it's very science-backed.
Well, I hope we're not fighting an uphill battle, because certainly technology has sped up the world tenfold from what it was 100 years ago, 50 years ago. I don't know. I mean, this is a conversation for another show because we are kind of running out of time. I'm not sure that technology is necessarily our friend. It's a double-edged sword,
It is. Yeah. It cuts both ways, and it really comes down to how you use it. So people, I think, because of the taboo we have against slowness, think, well, someone who's slow must be a Luddite, doesn't like screens, never. That's untrue. I mean, I love technology, right? I have an iPhone, I have a MacBook. I think gadgets are great. They're fun. They're productive.
Sure.
But they all have they all have an off button, right?
They all have an off button.
You can use them in ways that allow you to determine when the speed happens and when the slowness happens. So, for instance, my two favorite words are airplane mode, right? I keep my notifications switched off.
Yeah, perfect.
And I get so much out of my gadgets by approaching them with a slow spirit. So I think that, I think you're right. They're a double-edged sword, and if we use the right edge, then I think the gadgets can actually help us slow down.
Unfortunately, we never got a chance to hit on your books, and according to your bio here, we've got, 4 books that you've written? Do you have a website that people can check out and check out your books?
The easiest place for people to find everything about me is just www.inpraiseofslow.com. in praise of slow.com. All my talks, books, everything is there that anyone can possibly want to know about slow.
Great. Well, Carl, thanks so much for coming on the show and sharing about going slow. This was a very informative interview, and I enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you.
Best of luck.
Thank you very much, Douglas. I've